The Florida Gators have set up another visit with a transfer portal receiver in Texas's Johntay Cook.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast and Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free. Reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. And the Florida Gators yesterday had the announcement come out that they were bringing in wide receiver Johntay Cook this weekend for a visit. He's set to be on campus after the team returns from the bowl game, which is on Friday against Tulane. They get back either Friday night or Saturday morning, and Johntay Cook is set to be on campus on Saturday. That was also supposed to be the day that Chase Sowell was on campus. Obviously, Chase Sowell has since committed to Iowa State, so that's not happening. But Johntay Cook is set to be on campus this weekend. 6 feet tall, 185 pounds, and he was a 4- or 5-star receiver out of DeSoto, Texas in the 2023 class, depending on where you look. 4 or 5 stars. He only played in 6 games this year. It was not super productive. So let's lead with this one. There are usually 2 requirements we have for players out of the portal, and that is 1, they are proven productive players in this past season or their last full healthy season. Proven productive players that are looking to change schools again for whatever reason. It used to be, looking for a step up. Now it doesn't matter. There's NIL, there's coaching changes, there's everything. So proven productive player or someone who just finished their first season in college, and we look at them as extensions of the recruiting class, like the person we're talking about in the next segment there. But Johntay Cook played last year, played this year, and played in 6 games this year. He did not get injured, but in November he left the team. Texas Longhorns, if I didn't mention it already. So he left Texas in November and announced his intentions to enter the transfer portal. Okay. The reason for that, as to why Johntay Cook did not stay with Texas throughout the entirety of the season, is that Texas failed to meet the promises that they had made to him, that the 2 sides had agreed upon. You can connect the dots on that yourself. I will say I do not fault players for, essentially holding the schools accountable for, hey, you made these promises, live up to them. And that's that. So, yes, he does not fit the requirements. However, this is also just a unique case. I'm not saying to write it off. If you want to live up to the promises or if you want to live up to the standards that we set of proven productive player or guy who just finished his first year, that's perfectly fine. You can live up to that and say, hey, not a good take. That's a fine opinion to have. I don't fault you for that. I don't hate you for that or anything like that. I will say this, that gives me a little bit of, I guess I'll say a little bit of pause for holding him to those standards. Johntay Cook is the only receiver that the Florida Gators have really pursued in the portal this year that is under 6'2" that they've really shown interest in. Eric Rivers out of FIU was someone that we talked about initially, but as far as I've been told, and as I have communicated to the Locked On Gators Insider program, which if you want to join that, the link's in the description below, pretty much once Trey Wilson announced his intentions to return to Florida in 2025, Eric Rivers was no longer an option out of FIU. They were like, you know what, we got a guy. That's not what we're looking for right now. But Johntay Cook, 6 feet tall, 185 pounds. He is the outlier, right? The Nick Andersons, who's trending toward LSU at the time of recording this, the Chase Sowells, the Micah Hudson? No, Reggie Reggie Virgil. Micah Hudson was the Texas Tech guy that Florida never pursued and committed to Texas A&M. But he is the only really sub 6'2" receiver that we've seen the staff show genuine interest in, which to me kind of indicates how high this coaching staff is on him. He doesn't fit the other guidelines that they've been looking for. He's still got the speed, but he doesn't fit the height, weight, speed combo. Like he's not that physical freak that you look at and you go, well, big body on the outside. He's going to go out there and make these big plays, and he's going to be that big target that DJ Lagway has. No, he doesn't fit that requirement, which to me tells me that the staff views Johntay Cook as someone who, even though, again, sub 6'2", that they can bring in and he can contribute right away in this offense. And perhaps the most important part is that he would still have at least 2 years of eligibility, which means that you've still got that Lagway window, right? That Johntay Cook can come in, contribute right away, and then he could still be here for 2026 with the Lagway window. Because again, that's what we're looking at. When we talk about it on this show, we're looking at guys who can contribute to the Lagway window, these next 2 years. Those have to be the priority. We don't really want to look at the guys that we look at as extensions of the high school class right now. We want guys who come in and elevate the Florida Gators during the Lagway window. And this coaching staff seems to think that Johntay Cook can do that, right? Because again, he is the only sub 6'2" receiver that they're bringing in for a visit. He's the only sub 6'2" guy that they are looking at and strenuously pursuing, we'll say that. So he is the outlier. And I know that this is a thing that we talk about all the time with the Florida Gators coaching staff, that they've done a really good job recruiting they've done a really good job of bringing in very talented receivers from the portal, right? Chindike, Elijah Badger, Ricky Pearsall all went on to really exceed expectations. And so I think that when we look at that, you go, okay, well, any receiver that they show genuine interest in is someone that I think is pretty good, regardless of what my opinion is. They've got a better track record evaluating receivers, right? Which is one of the reasons why I get frustrated when a guy that they're pursuing goes to Iowa State or something like that, because, well, you pursued him, you liked him, you thought he was good, and you've done well evaluating these guys. So I don't even judge the opinion of the evaluation. I judge the process of the recruitment. So that's what I get annoyed about. I do think that Florida will have no problem finding talented receivers, but obviously they have priorities, and they're typically pursuing those guys earlier. Johntay Cook is someone that they think can step in and contribute, and they think highly enough of him to say, yeah, we have these guidelines, these guardrails. We're willing to go outside those guardrails for him. And I think that's an important indicator of how they value him in the transfer portal right now. We are going to talk about another player that Florida Gators recruited out of high school that does fit the 1-year player requirement. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Gators. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all of the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, leading into our first matchup, the SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. And yesterday, Auburn true freshman edge Amarus Williams announced his intention to enter the transfer portal. And almost immediately, we have been told by, if I'm not mistaken, it was Gators Online on 3, that said that Florida would pursue Amarus Williams in the transfer portal. And I will say this, talent-wise, I think Amarus Williams is fantastic. We talked about him a ton when he was committed to the Florida Gators because, again, when he was coming out of high school, he was committed to the Florida Gators for quite some time. He was one of those summer commits, And then either early signing day or the week of, he left and flipped to Auburn, which we'll talk about that process in a second. But when he was committed to Florida, we talked about him with Brian Smith, Locked On Seminoles host and our college football recruiting analyst. We talked about Amarus Williams a lot and how Amarus Williams was probably a day one player, was probably going to come in and contribute significantly, was a big-time player coming out of North Carolina. Then we spent a bunch of time talking about Amarus Williams being committed to Florida, but not really visiting campus, not communicating much with the staff, going on multiple visits to Ohio State, multiple visits to Auburn. And that's what bothers me. Like, I'm not going to lie. His high school recruitment, it's still a bit sour to me, right? Great football player on the field, great recruit on the field, elite measurables, elite size, elite athleticism. Like, he's got all those tools. He's a good football player as well. But off the field, externally, as in not inside the program, but from a fan perspective, at least if you feel differently, I'm assuming you're a Florida Gators fan if you're paying attention to this. If you feel differently, that's up to you. But as a fan, I feel like he jerked Florida around a little bit, right? Like I feel like he clearly had every intention of eventually leaving this recruiting class. And I feel like at that point, it's just like, then just a decommit, reopen your commitment and head out. That's one of the things that bothers me. It's like, if you're committed to a program and you don't really entertain them that much, that kind of irritates me. And when I look at Amarus Williams and I think back to his recruitment in high school, and this isn't me, spilling the beans. This wasn't a secretive thing. If you remember that high school recruitment, it was very much about NIL, right? It was very much about, hey, Amarus Williams is chasing the bag right now. He's a bag chaser coming out of high school. And I just have a hard time imagining that someone who was a bag chaser out of high school has gone to college for 1 year and is all of a sudden really changing that, especially with how often we see guys hit the portal, chase the bag, hit the portal, chase the bag, and go through that cycle again. So I have a hard time imagining that this is anything other than that. And so that two-pronged thought process there is that if Florida is genuinely going to pursue him, then we can finally have a conversation about Florida spending the NIL that we were told they would reallocate the buyout money. Because here's the thing with the buyout and that people, first off, stop saying 26 million on Twitter unless you're saying it as a troll. Like, if you're just screwing around, then sure. But stop saying 26 million, because Florida had the buyout money ready to go if they were going to fire Billy, which is an important thing to say. Hey, maybe they didn't collect all the buyout money. Maybe they just had the verbal agreement from boosters of, hey, yeah, if you fire him, I'll give you the money. Like, maybe that was the case when it's the boosters are ready with the $26 million. However, after Billy was given the vote of confidence by Scott Strickland, we then had the report come out that Florida would reallocate about 10 to 13 million of that to NIL, which is a whole different conversation that you don't have 26 million at your disposal. So if Florida is actually going to get into this recruitment for Amarus Williams, I would say that, yeah, this is them spending a good chunk of that money. Also important to acknowledge that a good chunk of that money was spent on retaining a lot of the talent, the Caleb Banks, the offensive linemen, those guys. A lot of the money was spent on that. However, the other prong approach here of if Florida's involved, then yes, they'll probably be spending money on him. The other approach is, or the other thought process is, he is from North Carolina, like I mentioned before. Last week, the North Carolina Tar Heels hired Bill Belichick to be their head coach, which, by the way, is just nuts to say in our lifetime that's an actual thing that happened. It is wild to say that. But when they hired Bill Belichick, they also announced that their NIL game for football got a significant boost, right? a lot more money was going to be invested in football NIL for North Carolina. Amarus Williams being from North Carolina, them openly saying, hey, we're willing to spend more money on players. We've got a much larger NIL pool for football. And also, let's be honest, if you're a defensive player especially, and you get the opportunity to be coached by Bill Belichick, that's something that at the very least you should consider, right? So it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Amarus Williams, at the end of the day, ended up playing for North Carolina. Like if he ended up there, that wouldn't shock me. They've got the money. They're close to home. They've got the coach. They've got everything in place. Wouldn't shock me at all if that's where he wound up. But if Florida really wants to get involved here, I expect that they will need to make a significant NIL package together for Amarus Williams. Don't forget, he's still a great football player. Yeah, he didn't play a ton at Auburn. That doesn't mean anything. We've seen guys not play in their true freshman season and then play really well. All right, like we've seen that happen before. That's fine. No one's faulting you for that. And again, he still fits that criteria of look at him as an extension of the high school class from last year. Bring him in there. So he still looks at that. He's still a player that we say would be a good take. That's totally fine. It's just for me personally, I feel like I've still got that sour taste of how his recruitment went and how his recruitment kind of broke down throughout the time. And looking at his, what's funny, he had 5 pressures on 60 pass rush attempts. Jack Pyburn, who committed to LSU, had 8 pressures on over 100 pass rush attempts. So production-wise, he'd be significantly better. I'm just throwing that one out there. Still a good football player. Just the other stuff irritated me. We will talk about one more player that I want the Florida Gators to pursue in the transfer portal next on Locked On Gators. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And if you're looking for the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players to win up to 1,000 times your cash, so you can run your game all season long on PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. You can go and look, Walter Clayton, more than 2.5 threes tonight. You can do that. You can look at Mac Jones, more than 7.5 rushing yards next week. Sorry, I'm trying to bring up a Jacksonville player there. You can look up Baker Mayfield, more or less passing yards. You do all that. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game with code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever listen to the podcast and on YouTube. To wrap up today's show, we are talking about a player that the Florida Gators saw last year in week 1, a player that entered the transfer portal. Yesterday, he announced his intentions to enter the transfer portal officially. I know that, I saw Miami fans say they heard about it weeks ago. I didn't hear about it. I'm not going to lie to you. But he entered the transfer portal. He is someone that I liked watching. I thought he was a fun watch. I thought he was talented. And it is wide receiver Isaiah Horton, 6'4", 205-pound wide receiver. He had 4 catches and 70 yards against the Florida Gators in week 1. And Florida recruited him out of high school. Obviously, this was years ago, but Florida recruited him out of high school. They were in his final, and he's entered the transfer portal now. He fits exactly what we're talking about and what we've been talking about for so long with looking at receivers in the transfer portal, right? He's 6'4", 205 pounds. He has the size to play on the outside. And this year, In Miami, he played almost exclusively on the outside. It was like something like 95% of his snaps were at wide receiver, not in the slot, nowhere else. But so he's an outside receiver, gives DJ Lagway, that big-bodied guy that we've been talking about for so long. We've been saying Florida needs. And yeah, Florida gets Khalil Jackson back in 2025. I've never been super fond of his play. I don't think he's a good separator. I don't think he's awesome at many of the just pure receiver things. And 56 catches, 616 yards, and 5 touchdowns for Isaiah Horton in 2024. He's the guy that I think you should go after. We've seen Florida kind of not land a lot of the guys that we've talked about. We've seen, Chase Sowell go to Iowa State, Reggie Virgil go to Texas Tech. We've heard Florida, not in it on some other guys that, Nick Anderson, as of last night, trending toward LSU. Like we've heard these things before. Isaiah Horton is a player that the Florida Gators should go pursue. He's already playing in your state. You've seen him up close and in person, and he played pretty well. Like, yeah, 4 catches isn't awesome. 70 yards, pretty damn good. We've seen him have games where he, I don't want to say, takes over, but the Cal game, he was a huge part in them winning that game. He had 9 catches, was big on converting first downs there, helped the team a lot, move the 6 there. And that's also one of the things. I know that when we talk about these big-bodied guys, a lot of times we go, oh, let him run downfield, throw a jump ball, and go just hope that he comes down with it, whatever it may be, which, by the way, 50-50 balls do not exist with Isaiah Horton. They are 60-40 balls. He's, in his career, 10 for 17 on contested catches, okay? 58.8% on contested catches. There's not 50-50 balls. There's 60-40 in his favor. But when we talk about these big-bodied receivers, a lot of times people go, oh, yeah, run downfield, win the jump ball, beat the corner in that area. I think one of the more overlooked areas for them, and by them I just mean big-bodied receivers, is moving the 6. Run a curl, throw a high ball, and let him win that one. Run a curl, and if you're a vertical receiver, they're probably going to be backing up quite a bit on you. You run a curl, open, underneath. Like moving the sticks and converting on first downs is something that I think is very much overlooked with a lot of these receivers. And he converted 35 first downs this season on 56 catches. That's a pretty damn high rate, especially if you've watched that offense. There were quite a few times where they were in pretty uncomfortable spots there. Great red zone target. Great downfield receiver, in my opinion, at least when he's given the opportunity to run downfield. I think he makes great plays there. Very good contested catch receiver. Like, go get him. Go get him. He's got, I believe, 1 year of eligibility remaining, or two years of eligibility remaining. Go get him. Have him for the Lagway window. 60-40 balls for him. And again, we've talked about this a lot with DJ Lagway and with Anthony Richardson. Obviously, DJ Lagway much better than Anthony Richardson as a passer. But we've talked about it where when you've got these big armed receivers and big armed QBs and they're looking to throw downfield frequently, you need guys with big catch radiuses. And Isaiah Horton has a pretty big catch radius. It's not just he can go up, he can go down, he can go left, he can go right. Like, he can actually extend and make these plays. He's someone that I would go for. And look, I know this coaching staff has not typically put the emphasis on some of these guys that I put on them, but he is someone that the Florida Gators should, and I feel like will pursue in the transfer portal. I think that they can recognize the talent, especially if they've seen it up close and in person. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free. We have us in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators football for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I will see you all next time.